Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first live coaching show from EquiRatings OnForm, EquiRatings and OnForm. It's great. I'm Sam Watson, international event writer, and I'm joined by Gear Fisher, co-founder of Training Peaks and OnForm. Gear, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks. It's exciting to kick this thing off. Episode 1. I think people are hopefully going to learn something or have a little fun too.
Exactly. I'm going to give a little bit of background as to why why I'm so excited about this coaching space and this training space and what we're bringing to it. I fully believe in the training over talent. And I would put it out there. I love having debates about this, but I say that I'm not that. In fact, I would say I'm below average in terms of talent. Like when people watch back photos, videos of me riding as a youngster. I mean, I still have no style. I definitely had no style then. I made huge mistakes on the public stage. I would have had people think and say to me that I'm not going to make it to top level. And, you know, I did okay for a while. And then I think after my second World Championships, when I had another real disappointment in the show jumping, and that was probably my phase that caught me out. I said, I can't go into another big stadium packed full of people and embarrass myself with a bad performance again. So I said, I'm either going to quit or I'm going to get better. And I literally gave it that winter. And with that level of motivation to basically save am I going to keep doing this or not? Things improved really quickly. And it was down to how focused I got with my training. And I changed it around. I got very measurable, like a lot of things that we'll talk about throughout this series. But it really changed the game for me. And that's why I think that, I mean, people talk about 10,000. There's loads of theories when it comes to improving in skill sports. I don't think it's just experience. You do need experience and time, but the purpose, how you spend that time, is what it's all about for me. So that's why I think that we can do huge things in this coaching space. Gear, I want to rewind the clock about 20 years to when you got involved with your first coaching and training platform. And I want you to talk to us about Training Peaks, really, why you started it and how it started. Because I even love these startup stories.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it a little bit. So for the last 20 years, I've spent building a company, a software platform called Training Peaks. And it was late 1999 that a very good friend of mine had just retired from pro cycling, came home to work with his father's coaching business, and saw his dad using the fax machine and 3-ring binders. And it was, it was 1999, so it was the age of the internet. And he reached out to me. I was a web programmer at the time, and asked if there was a way I could create some sort of website to enable them to communicate with their clients. They were a coaching business in running and cycling and triathlon. And they had quite a few clients all over the world, but every day he'd come into the office and there'd be rolls of fax machine paper sitting there, and you'd have to go through those training logs. And my buddy Dirk, he was like, Dad, there's got to be a better way. So his dad is Joe Friel, who wrote some of the best-selling books on training, structured training for triathlon and cycling, et cetera. And I was like, man, sounds like a cool project. I used to race bikes with Dirk, and figured we'd give it a shot. So I got to work programming that, and it was originally just to be a tool for their coaching company. A few months into it, realized that, said, hey, Dirk, what do you say we take this thing and let other coaches use it? And we can charge a subscription fee, and maybe we'd be able to start like a software company out of it. And Dirk and Joe, to their credit, they saw a lot of opportunity with that. So that's what we did. And we launched in October of 2000 with a tool that was only on the web at the time, and it allowed coaches to plan out training for their clients. The clients would go do it, come back, write down what they did, how much time and heart rate zones and things like that, how far they went. And it created this loop, this feedback loop. And Joe's books, the Training Bible series of books, are really all about structured training for triathlon, cycling, running, etc. And this tool, this platform, supported coaches, and we grew well beyond people that used just Joe's methodologies, and realized very early that we needed to be a platform for any coach. Let them, if they used 5 heart rate zones, or they like to do long workouts on Tuesdays instead of Saturdays, we didn't care. We just wanted them to use our platform to do the communication. So that's what
I like about the like how this started is the basic. You kind of said in there in there earlier, like that first line is, it's so coaches could plan those workouts and that training. And I know, because I think people, when they listen to this, they'll go, oh, heart rate zones, some people use heart rate monitors on their horses, very few riders on themselves, but it's kind of like take it or leave it. It's not about getting into the detail of, what the specific training was. It's that, for me, it's that overarching principle of planning out that training week, and it is written down, like I have it written down in a diary, what the horses have done this week, because we kind of do it for organization. But the fact that I'm still writing it down in a piece of paper means I can't analyze that. I can't look back and go, before the World Games, how many jumping sessions did I do in the 2 months leading up to that period? Like I can't do that. And I've been to 3 World Championships. I can't reflect and learn on those cycles without serious hardship. So if it's not easy, it's not going to get done. And you guys were doing this 20 years ago. Like, that's what I think is that's where I feel almost ashamed that we're that far behind, because that's surely something we've got to be able to optimize. Like, how many times, even when it comes to injury prevention, how much work should we be doing with these horses? And I know feel is an intuition and experience. You learn these things over time, but surely you can't learn it optimally. You can't optimize that loop. So is that right? Is that what you found coaches, what were they coming to you with? Was it that they couldn't handle the workload in terms of going, oh, this makes my life so much easier because I can do these training schedules for my athletes? Was it other coaches trying to learn and get these training schedules from other people as well? Were people sort of trying to learn, oh, is there a better way? Because I think that would be interesting for us right now.
A lot of it was simply very, very much going from feel to more science-based structure, because there's this mythical thing called form, where you have some great performance, right? And then everybody's interest is to repeat it. And so you think you're doing all the right things, you feel like you're doing the right things, and then you have an outcome that's very different from the last time. And you're like, dang it, why did that happen? Well, in cycling, professional cycling back in the early 2000s, it was very much by feel. I mean, we used to kid when we worked with like the Belgians and European professional cyclists. The goal of the day was to ride 5 hours, because yesterday they rode 4 hours. And it was these, people with cycling history that just had the feel. That's what we always did. That's what we're going to keep doing. And started to change in the early 2000s with better technology and better science. So this process going from, art to science is really what we tried to help with our platform. And with coaches, it really started to become, look, if we can't measure this, if we can't look back on history, if we can't compare what you did last time in the outcome to this time in the outcome, how is it other than shooting in the dark? So that's kind of that was the wave that came over cycling and eventually triathlon and running, along with the proliferation of various, GPS devices and things like that, where it started out at the very high end for Olympic teams, et cetera. And now, go to your local, bike trail anywhere in the world, and people are wearing devices, using apps to track distance and speed and pace, et cetera. So it's become very common. And now my time with Training Peaks came to an end about 1.5 years ago, and Well, my daughter simultaneously had been getting into horse sport, and I started learning about equine sports 3 years ago. And it was kind of shocking to find out that, I was very used to coaches and all this structured training. Here's your plan. Here's what you're doing. Here's what you're doing next week. And that really didn't seem to exist in equestrian sports. And so I started kind of researching that, and lo and behold, this company called EquiRatings I got introduced to, and have learned a lot from you guys. And that was the quick introduction to how we got here.
Yeah. A lot of people, when you say, like, what's your starting out talking about making a plan, like what's the end goal, you'll get a lot of people kind of say something like, I'd love to go to badminton, I suppose, or something like that. And that could be starting out at any level. So that could be like a goal 4 or 5 years in the future. It's a bit like starting a company and saying, I want to be a millionaire. But it's like, it's breaking that down. You need to create that system, make that. I mean, for me, one of the things is I have no problem if I end up in a year's time in the same place as I did today, as I am today. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed that I haven't progressed, but as long as I feel that I have I've had a system in place so that I can go, well, I tried things and they didn't learn, or they didn't work. So I'm going to learn from that. I don't want to be in the same place next year. So I can either change something, I can improve something. I know what did work, what didn't work. But I think that is where we're still. And for me, I think we've probably we sometimes use the horse as an excuse sometimes, because that is absolutely our unique element. And I think for a lot of people, and please do ask us questions, listeners, and stuff like that, and give your thoughts, and feel free to disagree. It's great if people do agree with us. But a horse, they are less predictable, but I have found that's even more reason to have a plan and have a system.
That single fact alone, imagine having these incredible athletes that you're trying to coach, and they can't talk to you. So you would want to try and get other information about them so you can ensure that you're peaking their performance or staying safe, healthy, etc. And so that actually kind of surprised me too, is there's not that many people that I've run into that are writing down even what they did yesterday or what they're doing tomorrow for a training program. And I find that the horse part of it's fascinating. And of course it's fitness and it's technique. But again, the platform, the thing that happened over time is we supported what I call, the loop. And that loop is basically, set a goal, have a plan, do really focused practice, and get feedback and repeat. And that is often, this term deliberate practice, which has been out there, that eventually, got to the 10,000 hours sort of common term. It's really not about that. It's really about having structure, focusing on one little piece of practice and nailing it. It's not playing the entire 4-minute long song with your guitar every time. It's working on those 2 measures that you have an issue with, right? It's finding little pieces that you can focus on and just absolutely master before moving on, and doing it with purpose, and putting that together in a plan, working with a coach. That has become so common for maximizing performance in cycling and triathlon and et cetera. I just figured there had to be a way to bring that to sports that don't necessarily depend on fitness per se, right? And so I'd call the skill sports, where technique is really important. And that's where equestrian, I really fell in love with the challenge. You have to be fit, of course, your horse needs to be fit, but there's so much involved with the rider, and probably, as I've learned, maybe 80-90% is the rider, and that technique has to be mastered. So if we can take video, I think video is the tool. It's the thing around which a coach and an athlete can have a conversation about how to improve your skill when it comes to technique sports. Much like my last 20 years has been a conversation around a heart rate file or a pace, data file, power data file. And the coach can see how many intervals their athlete were doing, and should we do more or less at what power output, et cetera. And now we take that to video for improving people's technique and form in skill sports.
Yeah, I think you actually dropped in the a title for another show as well in terms of how much is the rider and how much is the horse. I think that will definitely be something we'll address, because I think as one thing that if I pick up Tiger Woods golf clubs, his clubs aren't going to kind of come back to my level and change how they are. They are just a set of clubs. But a horse will adapt to how you ride. And actually some of the top horses to get that real level of elite performance, it can be a little bit handling a Usain Bolt, handling or the same as a car, so much horsepower that actually is really difficult for an inexperienced person. So, I mean, we know that, and inexperienced riders will try and avoid those complicated horses. But horses do, they do kind of come back to where you're at as a rider. So I'm always saying to people, rather than putting, if you think of how much do you invest in training every year and how much do you invest in a horse every year, to try and get that balance right. I think that'll be fascinating for a show. I fully agree on the video being the feedback loop for coaching. And I suppose that's how we've ended up with OnForm. But that is how I wrote an article on this about endurance athletes and strength and power-based sports, where you have to work yourself, work your body, stress your muscles, and then you have to actively let them recover. And then you want to repeat that loop. So that kind of stress and rest gets quoted quite a lot, and you'll hear that quite a lot. From me, it was try, which I suppose is the same as train. But we had to make mistakes and then learn from the mistakes. And that's our loop. I think in a skill sport, that's our loop. And if we take it back to the theoretical sort of process that you mentioned, how set yourself a target, make a plan, and get into that cycle. That's what I did after that, at that turning point for me with the World Games. I was show jumping clear at a rate of 25%. So only 1 in 4 show jumping rounds at 4 and 5 star level was where I was jumping clear. And I actually had to analyze that. I had to kind of say, well, where am I now? If this isn't good enough for me, this experience, quantify where I am. I set myself a target for the end of 2015. I wanted to be jumping clear over 50% of the time at that top level at 4 and 5 star, because I knew there's going to be margin for error. I was probably only going to compete about 10 times internationally. So I said, look, I can, as long as I get above 50%, I'm making progress here. So I had a target. That was the first thing. And my plan then, my strategy was going to be accuracy. I said, okay, if I make myself more accurate, I know I've got to be able to jump more clear ends, because I knew a lot of the mistakes I was making, a lot of rails that I was having, was because my eye just wasn't there. I was coming off turns and I was second guessing, interfering with the horse because I was too unsure of the distance. So I said, I got to get comfortable on these distances. If I can get my horse to that takeoff point in a canter, keeping the same rhythm, I'm surely going to jump more clear rounds. So I'm just going to work on accuracy. And then I made my kind of learning loop. I designed exercises that would give me feedback so I could work on them by myself. Now, this is where I think the exciting thing for me is that with OnForm, where I was 5-6 years ago, I was out in my field training just by myself and having to design these exercises that would give me feedback. I think now we're going to be able to have someone there with a video and ping that off to a coach and get their feedback and get that help. So I think we're going to really help people in their improvement. But my exercises were, I would just put a pole a couple of inches off the ground on the very bottom hole of the wings. So it was like a canter pole, but it was just raised. So I knew that if I made the mistake, the horse was going to knock it and it was going to fall. And that would be my reset. You know, if I make that mistake, I've got to reset. So I would say, and this is after World Games, I would do just a single raise canter pull, and I wouldn't always get 10 in a row. I couldn't always get to 10. I would make mistakes occasionally getting to 10. I couldn't do 10 in a row. But I got to a point where I could go, I mean, once I was getting 10 much more regularly, then I'd be like, now it's 20. And to be able to keep doing it as the horse would get a little bit more tired, to be able to keep that up and challenge myself. And then I would get to a point where I say, right, I'm doing my accuracy, and I would do over 50 in a row. I get up to, I think I got into the mid 70s was where I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm bored now. But it reminded me of like the golfers who would putt from 6 feet away all the time and just put hundreds and hundreds of balls in the hole.
Right.
Right. So that's what I was doing. But it gave me feedback, and that's how I could learn, and it was measurable. So I think that's what really helped me to kind of go to the next level.
Yeah. To get better at golf isn't just playing 18 holes round after round after round. It's identifying your weakness or your limiter, you know, if it's putting, if it's your approach, your driver, whatever, and then focusing on that thing that is your weakness. And you did it naturally with show jumping, you know, that stage of the event. And then it's saying, okay, what are the drills and things that I can design that are going to improve that one specific little piece? And through that process, you end up developing mastery. And then that works, you know, your limiter becomes a strength over time, or at least becomes a much lower limiter per se. So that is the essence of what I see. And it doesn't have to be in a grand scale, even at your, you know, top level. I see it, you know, for my daughter, for age group athletes in the running or cycling world. Everybody has something they can work on. So it's being willing to identify it. And then, you know, where do you go for help? You go to get a coach, because you don't necessarily know, you know, as a normal person, you don't necessarily know exactly what drill or thing you should do that's going to actually help improve that skill. So you find somebody with expertise, and that's where the trainer comes in. And the ability to employ a trainer beyond just the, you know, 40 minutes in an arena or, you know, an in-person lesson, which of course is incredibly valuable, is also part of what makes, you know, technology so cool. Is you can have access to that knowledge from that trainer beyond just the time in the lesson, or you can take what you learn in that lesson and study it further afterwards, right? If you have some video, if you have that data file, if you have some information about it. Because the goal here is always progress, right? It's you cannot control an outcome. You can't show up to a race and, you know, get on the podium. You can show up to a race mentally prepared, physically prepared, you know, and have managed the process as best as you can. And that's what this is all about, is allowing you to bring structure to the process rather than hoping you're going to do well the day that you really want to do well. And I think the more science, the more structure people bring in, it's been proven, the more positive outcomes are able to be attained.
Yeah, you're hitting bang on echo ratings territory now when you talk about, no one can guarantee an outcome. So what we always talk about with our clients is maximizing the chance of success. There is a probability of achieving that outcome. That's what you're trying to manage, and all of these marginal gains, all of these things should be increasing that likelihood of having that favorable outcome. So if your goal, like for me, the goal being to get that 50% clear round rate, I couldn't guarantee it, and I had to have the door open that even if I didn't achieve it, I needed enough measurables in my process and in my system to see, was it by chance that it didn't come off, or are all of my kind of input variables as well telling me, that's why I made my accuracy so measurable, is because if I'm knocking poles all the time at home, then I'm not unlucky that I'm knocking poles in a competition. You know, that's where my process isn't good enough. So being able to match those two up. But what I want to focus on that you were touching on there, because I think this is the game changer, And I really, really feel that coaching in equestrian sports is about to really, really change when it comes to this idea of purposeful practice, which for us really, as we've discussed, is kind of training with feedback, and the coaches having the coach's opinion and some in some ways accountability, but in some ways even the fact that I'm doing the correct exercise on the right day, or I'm doing the most appropriate exercise for that day. If I'm having a rest day and I'm just hacking my horse and having an easy day, even that should be a purposeful decision. Even there should be thought behind that decision. Going, today is an easy day. I don't need to see you, but I do want to know that you've done, 5 kilometers, 3 of which were in trot, 2 of which were in walk. Whatever it is that there's thought gone into it. That is, I don't think I wouldn't be criticizing. I think there's a lot of reasons why the equestrian industry and sport, why we've trained the way we've trained. And that's because most of us train from a farm, we're remote because that's the nature of horses. It's very expensive to be based with a professional coach 24/7. It's not as easy as if you want to be a tennis player, if you want to be a golfer, you go off to an academy and you train with a coach day in, day out. Very hard to do that in equestrian sports. It's harder. So I think this is where OnForm can really help. That is that we can make that connection. Maybe not all of your training. That's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming to come in and absolutely just put a big support around the current coaching loop. But I don't think, with the people I coach, I'd love to think that now, instead of just seeing them on a Friday once a week, or a Monday or a Tuesday, wherever their slot is, that I can then say, okay, so you can have an easy day tomorrow, but on Sunday, I want you to have a fitness day. On Monday, I want you to do some test riding, and I want you to video that test. You do your warm up. You can ride through it a couple of times by yourself, but you have a deliverable. I need to see a video of that so that I can review it. We can go through it. And straight away, we've got feedback on Monday, which we didn't have before. Tuesday could be an accuracy day. Warm up with your exercises, play with these exercises, do one with related distances, do one with turns. But I want to see 2 of those exercises, 1 on each rein, videoed as well. I need to see, 4 minutes of video from Tuesday as well. And again, sorry, I muted myself. So that's the progress, and that for me, that's what still gets my energy. Like, that's when I think of OnForm, and I think of where I was 10 years ago. And one of the things I mentioned in an article was the proof of this is you look at how many people in skill sports were trained by their parents at some point. In eventing, it's huge. Like Zara Phillips, Harry Mead. Like, my dad was a silver medalist. Ingrid Klimke, Michael Young is famously trained by his dad. And it's because of that constant access to feedback. It's just your coach is right there all the time, and that's what I think we can now do for everyone.
Yeah. Well, as an example, at Training Peaks, I think we found, similarly, that very rarely would the coach actually be physically present with their clients. So I think it ended up being something like 80% of the clients that coaches worked with, they would never meet in person. It was all done remotely, and that was enabled by the platform. It was never to prevent meeting in person, but sometimes when you want access to a coach who's really focused on one certain area and they live 1,000 miles away, technology is the perfect way to bring those two together. So those are some things that, again, I see that happening in horse sport, and hopefully we can improve that going forward.
I've got Derm in the background saying that he mentioned his silver medal. I can see that now. Silver medal mentioned. That's the other. Was
that at the World Games, Sam?
Yeah, that was at the World Games in Tryon, 2018. 40 years after my daddy. Yeah, no, all good stuff. Well, I like that access that you're talking about, Gear. Like, that's sometimes you ask yourself, wow, what if I could train with Yogi Breisner or Eric Duvander, or, you know, like you kind of, I wonder what these people would think. And, you know, there's a, you know, the coaches are joining this platform. They're joining OnForm. They're making themselves available, and there is a chance that you will be able to learn how to ride cross country efficiently and smoothly like Chris Burton, you know, because, you know, he's going to make himself available, and say, you know, like, or we all become you know, we can all put ourselves out there, make our, I think that the training plans is going to be a big one, and the training exercises is going to be a big one, that it just opens up the world. It's access, and technology has done this in so many industries already. Sometimes you look at this and you go, God, we relate to the party, but let's not look back. Let's look forward and enjoy it. So there we go.
Yeah, it's feedback. It's great feedback in person, and now we can bring feedback and accessibility, you know, beyond just your lesson time. So I think that that's been a great conversation, though, Sam. I think this is our episode 1. Episode 2 will probably be as stellar.
Yeah,
we'll see. I'm sure it can get better. We'll get some feedback from some folks.
We'll get feedback. That magic word. Give us feedback, folks. How did we do? What do we need to do better to improve our process? Some like anything subject matter. I was going to talk about confidence at one point, and kind of competition nerves and that sort of stuff. I was going to get into that. I liked the one we touched on today. You know, how much do we think is rider? How much do we think is horse? You know, I think that's a really interesting conversation, how that changes potentially going through the levels of the sport. You know, not every horse is going to be capable of going around a 5-star and stuff. So guys, when it comes to this area, I mean, we're calling it the coaching show. It's the, you know, let's talk about equestrian progress show. So any subjects are on the table. If you want us to start looking for guests and stuff like that, I've got some. Equity ratings posting. That's Darren when he says stop looking down for a start. I'm just reading what you're writing, so you're making me look down more. Yeah, there we go, folks. I'm wrapping up. I'm not as professional as Nicole Brown. Gear Fisher, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. Take care, everyone.